which, standing midst the place enclosed for services divine, and looking up to heaven and Jove, who saw him well, he poured upon the place of sacrifice, and humbly thus implored. Great Dodonius. Dodonius, probably, because he's of Dodona. See, I wrote Dodonius here, but looking at it in context, I'm going to say Dodonius. And humbly thus implored. Great Dodonius, President of cold Dodoni's towers. President of cold Dodoni's towers, divine Pelasgius. Pelasgicus? I've never heard it written like that. Pelasgicus. Pelasgikos. But you wouldn't put the emphasis where the ancient Greek goes. Great Dodonius, president of cold Dodoni's towers, divine Pelasgicus that dwellst far hence, about whose bowers the austere prophetic Selli dwell, that still sleep on the ground, go bare and never cleanse their feet. Selli. Ask some. Whose bowers the austere prophetic Selli dwell, that still sleep on the ground, go bare and never cleanse their Selli dwell, that still sleep on the ground, go bare and never cleanse their feet. As I before have found grace to my vows and hurt to grace, so my prayers intend. I still stay in the gathered fleet, but have dismissed my friend amongst my many myrmidons to danger of the dart. Oh, grant his valor my renown of the dart. Oh, grant his valor my renown, arm with my mind his heart, that Hector's self may know my friend can work in single war, and then in war, and not then only show his hands, so hot and singular, when my kind presence seconds him. But fight he seconds him. But fight he ne'er so well, no further let him trust his fight, but when he shall repel clamor and danger from our fleet, vouchsafe a safe retreat. Vouchsafe a safe retreat to him and all his companies, with fames and arms complete. He prayed, and heaven's great counselor gave satisfying ear to one part of his orisons, but left the other there. He let him free the fleet of foes, but safe retreat denied. Other there. He let him free the fleet of foes, but safe retreat denied. Achilles left that utter part where part where he his zeal applied, and turned into his inner tent, made fast his cup, and then stood forth, and with his mind beheld the foes fight, and his men that followed his great-minded friend, embattled till they break with gallant spirit upon the foe. And as fell wasps that make their dwellings in the broad highway, which foolish children use, their cottages being near their nests to anger and abuse, with ever vexing them, and breed, to soothe their childish war, a common ill to many men. Since, if a traveller, that would his journey's end apply, and pass them unassayed, came near and vexed them, upon him the children's faults are paid. And vex them, upon him the children's faults are laid. Hold on a second. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A traveller that would his journey's end apply, and pass them unassayed, come near and vex them, upon him the children's faults are laid. For on they fly as he were such, and still defend their own. So fared it with the fervent mind of every myrmidon, who poured themselves out of their fleet upon their wanton foes, that needs would stir them, thrust so near, and cause the overthrows of many others that had else been never touched by them, nor would have touched. Patroclus then put his wind to the stream. And thus exhorted. You know, good father, our great friend is apt to take offense. And thus exhorted. Patroclus then put his wind to the stream, and thus exhorted. Now, my friends, remember you express your late urged virtue. Now, my friends, remember you express your late urged virtue, and renown our great Iacides, that he, being strongest of all the Greeks, his eminence may dim all others likewise in our strengths that far off imitate him. And Agamemnon now may see his fault as general as his place high. Dishonoring him that so much honors all. Thus made he sparkle their fresh fire, and on they rushed, filled full her hollow sides with... The fleet filled full her hollow sides with sounds that terribly did greet the amazed Trojans, and their eyes did second their amaze when great Menetius' son they saw. I didn't write a pronunciation for that, but it's definitely Menetius. He spelled it in a different way, is why I'm saying that. Second their amaze when great Menetius' son they did greet the Trojans, and their eyes did second their amaze when great Menetius' son they saw, and his friend's armor blaze. All troops stood troubled with conceit that Peleus' son was there, his anger cast off at the ships, and each looked everywhere for some authority to lead the then prepared flight. for some authority to lead the then prepared flight. Patroclus greeted with a lance the region where the fight made strongest tumult, near the ship Protesilaus brought, and struck Perechmin, who before the fair-helmed peons fought. Let's start pulling names here. Perechmin, Protesilaus, peons, Amydon, Axius. Good. Protesilaus brought, and struck Perechmin, who before the fair-helmed peons fought, led from Amydon, near whose walls the broad-streamed Axius flows. Through his right shoulder flew the dart, whose blow struck all the blows in his power from his powerless arm. Struck all the blows in his power from his powerless arm, and down he groaning fell. It fell. His men all flying, their leader fled. This one dart did repel. Okay. And down he groaning fell. His men all flying, their leader fled. This one dart did repel the whole guard placed about the ship, whose fire extinct, half burned, the peons left her, and full cry to clamorous flight returned. Then spread the Greeks about their ships, triumphant tumult flowed, and as from top of some steep hill the lightner strips a cloud, and lets a great sky out from heaven, in whose delightsome light all prominent foreheads, forests, towers, and temples cheer the sight, so cleared these Greeks the Trojans' cloud. So cleared these Greeks this Trojan cloud, and at their ships and tents obtained a little time to breathe, but found no present vents to their inclusions. Nor did Troy, though these Paeonians fled, lose any ground, but from this ship they needfully turned head. Then every man a man subdued. Patroclus in the thigh struck Areilycus. His dart the bone did break, and fly quite through, and sunk him to the earth. Good Menelaus slew accomplished Thoas, in whose breast, being naked, his lance he threw above his shield, and freed his soul. Phylides, taking note that bold Amphiclus bent at him, prevented him, and smote his thigh's extremest part, where man his fattest muscle lies, the nerves torn with his lance's pile, and darkness closed his eyes. Antilochus Atimnius seized, his steel lance did impress his first 3 guts, and loosed his life. At young Nestorides, Maris, Atimnius' brother, flew, and at him and loosed his life. At young Nestorides, Maris, Atimnius' brother, flew, and at him Thrasymed, the brother to Antilochus. His eager javelin's head the muscles of his arm cut out, and shivered all the bone. Night closed his eyes, his lifeless corse his brother fell upon. And so by 2 kind brothers' hands did 2 kind brothers bleed, both being divine Sarpedon's friends, and were the darting seed of Amisodorus. Okay, there's a good chance to check the names I just did. Areilycus, Menelaus, Thoas, Phylides, I can't remember who's. I think Thoas is the son of Phyleus. No, not Thoas. Meges? Oh yeah, Meges. Thoas is not. Well, whatever. Okay, Amphiclus, Good. Nestorides, Thrasymed, Atimnius. Didn't I just check that one? Oh no, I checked Areolicus. I didn't check Atimnius because I don't have a pronunciation for Atimnius. Do I have it in my master guide here? Atimnius. Atimnus? Oh, that's a different character, I guess. Or at least he spelled it differently. Let's put in Atimnius. And then the paradigm for pronunciation would at least be the same, so. Okay, so all of those were correct. Now, where are we here? Sarpedon, abhorred Chimera. Oh, Amisodorus is who I was checking also. Amisodorus, that was right. Oeliades, Cleobulus. That doesn't sound Greek to me. Let me check that again. What's the Greek pronunciation of that? Cleobulos. I guess it is correct. Cleobulos. Yep, okay, good. Cleobulus. Let's say Cleobulus. Cleobulus. And I'm going to assume he's not in other chapters, but let's check. Not in other chapters. Okay. What else we got here? Lycon, Pinellius. Lycon. All right, this is probably good enough for now. And so by two kind brothers' hands did... Actually, let me write a note here. Okay. Did two kind brothers bleed, both being divine Sarpedon's friends, and were the darting seed of Amisodorus that kept the bane of many men abhorred. That kept the bane of many men abhorred Chimera, and such bane now caught his children. Ajax Oeliades did take Cleobulus alive, invading him stayed by the press, and at him then let drive with his short sword that cut his neck, whose blood warmed all. With his short sword that cut his neck, whose blood warmed. Why can't I get? It doesn't seem right. Cut his neck, whose blood warmed all the steel. His short sword that cut his neck, whose blood warmed all the steel. And cold death with a violent fate his sable eyes did seal. Pinellius and Lycon cast together off their darts, but missed, and both together then went with their swords. In parts the blade and hilt went, laying on upon the helmet's height. Pinellius' sword caught Lycon's neck and cut it through thrice. cut it. So he's trying to force you to add an extra syllable to the word through. He spells it as thorough. But in an audiobook, that's just going to sound like I made a mistake. So I'll just extend the word. Peneleus' sword caught Lycaon's neck and cut it through quite. His head caught Lycaon's neck and cut it through quite. His head hung by the very skin. The swift Meriones, pursuing flying Acamas, just as he got access to horse and chariot, overtook, and took him such a blow on his right shoulder that he left his chariot and did strow the dusty earth. And took him such a blow on his right shoulder that he left his chariot and did strow the dusty earth. Life left his limbs, and night his eyes possessed. Idomeneus his stern dart. All right, let's check some more names since I can. Aramis. Acamas. I guess that's it. Okay. His eyes possessed. Idomeneus his stern dart at Aramis addressed, as like to Acamas he fled. It cut the sundry bones beneath his brain. He fled. It cut the sundry bones beneath his brain, betwixt his neck and foreparts, and so runs, shaking his neck and foreparts, and so runs, shaking his teeth out through his mouth, his eyes all drowned in blood. So through his all drowned in blood. So through his nostrils and his mouth that now dart open stood, he all drowned in blood. So through his nostrils and his mouth that now dart open stood, he breathed his spirit. Thus had death his spirit. Thus had death from every Grecian chief, a chief of Troy. For as to a chief of Troy. For as to kids or lambs, their cruelest thief, the wolf, steals in, and when he sees that by the shepherd's sloth the dams are spersed about the hills, then serves his ravenous tooth with ease, because his prey is weak. So serve the Greeks their foes, discerning well how shrieking flight did all their spirits dispose, their biding virtues quite forgot. And now the natural spleen that Ajax their spirits dispose. So served the Greeks their foes, discerning well how shrieking flight did all their spirits dispose, their biding virtues quite forgot. And now the natural spleen that Ajax bore to Hector, still by all means would have been within his bosom with a dart, but he knew the war. But he that knew the war, well covered in a well-lined shield, did well perceive how far the arrows and the javelins reached by being within their sounds. Well perceive how far the arrows and the javelins reached by being within their sounds and ominous singings, and observe the there inclining bounds of conquest in her aid of him, and so obeyed her change, took safest course for him and his, and stood to her as strange. And as when Jove intends a storm, he lets out of the stars from steep Olympus a black cloud that all heaven's splendor bars from men on earth, from men on earth. So from the hearts of all the Trojan host, all comfort lately all the Trojan host, all comfort lately found from Jove in flight and cries. All comfort lately found from Jove in flight and cries was lost. Was lost. Nor made they any fair retreat. Heaven's any fair retreat. Hector's unruly horse would needs retire him, and he left. Unruly horse would needs retire him, and he left engaged his Trojan force, forced by the steepness of the dike, that in ill place they took, and kept them that would fain have gone. Their horses quite forsook a number of the Trojan kings, and left them in the dike. Their chariots in their foreteams broke. Their chariots in their foreteams broke. Patroclus in their foreteams broke. Patroclus then did strike while steel was hot, and cheered his friends, nor meant his enemies good, who, when they once began to fly, each way received a flood, and choked themselves with drifts of dust. And now were clouds begot beneath the clouds, with fright and noise the horse neglected not their home intendments, and where rout was busiest, there poured on Patroclus most exhorts and threats, and there lay overthrown numbers beneath their axle trees, who, lying in flight stream, made the after chariots jolt and jump in driving over them. The immortal horse Patroclus rode did pass the dike with ease, and wish the depth and danger more. And Menetiades. See that? I chose that from a previous one that I thought worked, but now it seems like he wants it to be Menetiades. And wished the depth and danger more. And Menetiades. Well, actually, we could make that work. And wished the depth and danger more. And Menetiades as great. And more. And Menetiades as great a spirit had to reach, retiring Hector's haste. More. And Menetiades as great a spirit had to reach, retiring Hector's haste. But his fleet horse had too much law, and fetched him off too fast. And as in autumn the black earth is loaden with the storms that Jove in gluts of rain pours down, being angry with the forms of judgment in authorized men, that in their courts maintain with violent offense wrested laws, and, fearing gods nor men, exile all justice. Fearing gods nor men, exile all justice, for whose fault whole fields are overflown, and many valleys cut away with torrents headlong thrown. From neighbor mountains, till the sea receive them roaring in. Headlong thrown from neighbor mountains, till the sea receive them roaring in. And judged men's labors then are vain, plagued for their judges' sin. So now the foul defaults of some all Troy were laid upon. So like those torrents roared they back to windy Ilion. And so like tempests blew the horse with ravishing back again those hot assailants, all their works at fleet now rendered vain. Patroclus, when he had dispersed the foremost phalanxes, called back his forces to the fleet, and would not let them press, as they desired, too near the town, but twixt the ships and flood, and their steep rampire, his hand steeped and their steep rampire, his hand steeped revenge in seas of blood. Then Pronous was the first that fell beneath his fiery lance. Pronous. All right, let's check the names again. Okay. Pronous, Thestor, Enops, Patroclus, Thestor. Okay, for now that's good. The next paragraph is going to have a bunch of them. Seas of blood. Then Pronous was first that fell beneath his fiery lance, which struck his bare breast near his shield. The second Thestor's chance, old Enops' son, did make himself, who's shrinking. The second Thestor's chance, old Enops' son, did make himself, who shrinking and set close in his fair seat, even which the approach Patroclus made, did lose all manly courage, in so much that from his hands his reins fell flowing down, and his right jaw Patroclus' lance attains, struck through his teeth, and there it stuck, and by it to him drew dead Thestor to his chariot. Stuck, and by it to him drew dead Thestor to his chariot. It stuck, and by it to him drew dead Thestor to his chariot. Through his teeth, and there it stuck, and by it to him drew dead Thestor to his chariot. It showed as when you view an angler from some prominent rock draw with his line and hook a mighty fish out of the sea, for so the Greek did pluck the Trojan gaping from his seat, his jaws oped with a dart, which when Patroclus drew, he fell, his life and breast did part. He fell, his life and breast did part. Okay, this next paragraph we're going to need name checks. Euryalus, not Euryalus. Euryalus, Tlepolemus, Epaltes, Damastorides, yep, Evippus, Echius, Iphius. I don't have one for him. Iphius. Okay, let's check Iphius. I see one for Hippeas, but can't be the same, unless Chapman chose to ignore the H. Another one says Ipheas. Iphias. Let's say Iphias. Okay. Amphoterus. Aramis. Polymelus. I might have to cut this off because I'm going to forget the earlier ones. Argidus. Argeadus. Oh yeah, Argeadas. Argeadus. Okay, I gotta cut it off there. His life and breast did part. Then rushed he on See, here we go. Arelaeus. Breast did part. Then rushed he on Arelaeus, at whom he hurled a stone, which strake his head so in the midst. Okay. And breast did part. Then rushed he on did part. Then rushed he on Arelaeus, at whom he hurled a stone. Then rushed he on Arelaeus, at whom he hurled a stone, which strake his head so in the midst that two, which strake his head so in the midst that two was made of one. 2 ways it fell, cleft through his casque. And then Tlepolemus, Epaltes, Demastorides, Evippus, Echius. I want to check that one again. Epheus, Amphoterus, Aramis, Polymelus, Argeades. Okay. Evippus, Echius, Epheus, bold Amphoterus, and valiant Aramis. And then Tlepolemus, Epaltes, Demastorides, Evippus, Echius, Epheus, bold Amphoterus, and valiant Aramis, and Polymelus by his sire surnamed Argeades. He heaped upon Argeades, cleft through his casque. And then through his casque. And then Tlepolemus, Epaltes. I'm going to check that one again. Epaltes. His casque. And then Tlepolemus, Epaltes, Demastorides, Evippus, Echius, Epheus, bold Amphoterus, and valiant Aramis, and Polymelus by his sire surnamed Argeades. He surnamed Argeades. Oh, no, it's Argeadas. Valiant Aramis, and Polymelus. By his sire surnamed Argeadas. He heaped upon the much-fed earth. When Jove's most worthy son, divine Sarpedon, saw these friends thus stayed, and others run. All right, I gotta pull in Sarpedon's voice, which I already did. Hector, where is thy unthankful vaunt, and that huge strength on which Okay. These friends thus stayed, and others run. Oh, shame! Why fly ye? Then he cried. Why fly ye? Then he cried. Now show ye feet enow. On, keep your way. Myself will meet the man that startles you, to make me understand his name, that flaunts in conquest thus, and hath so many able knees, so soon dissolve to us. So soon dissolve to us. Down jumped he from his chariot, down leapt his foe as light, and as on some far-looking rock a cast of vultures fight, fly on each other, strike and truss, part, meet, and then stick both with crooked beaks, and seers cry, fight, Stick by, tug both with crooked beaks, and seers cry fight and cry. And seers cry. And then stick by, tug both with crooked beaks, and seers cry fight and cry. So fiercely fought these angry kings, and showed as bitter galls. Jove, turning eyes, bitter galls. Jove, turning eyes to this stern fight, his wife and sister calls, and much moved for the Lycian prince, said, okay, already pulled Jupiter and Juno here. And my power to give it act. Sister calls, and much moved for the Lycian prince, said, Oh, that to my son fate by this day and man should cut a thread so nobly spun. Oh, that to my son fate by this day and man should cut a thread so nobly spun. Two minds distract me, if I should now ravish him from fight and set him safe in Lycia, or give the fates their right. Austere Saturnius, she replied, what unjust words are these? A mortal long since marked by fate wouldst then? Marked by fate wouldst thou immortalize? Do, but by no god be approved. Free him, and numbers more, sons of immortals, will live free. Okay, let's just check Juno. Who was that? Okay, good. Free him, by no god be... Do, but by no god be approved. Free him, and numbers more, sons of immortals, will live free, that death must taste before these gates. Live free, that death must taste before these gates of Ilion. Every god will have his son a god, or storm extremely. Give him then an honest period in brave fight by Patroclus' word, if he be dear to thee, and grieves thee by his dangered life, of which, when he is free, let death and somnus bear him thence, till Lycia's natural womb. Bear him thence, his son a god, or storm extremely. Give him then an honest period in brave fight by Patroclus' sword, if he be dear to thee, and grieves thee by his dangered life, of which, when he is free, let death and somnus bear him hence, till Lycia's natural womb receive him from his brother's hands and citizens, a tomb and column raised to him. This is the honor of the dead. She said, and her speech ruled his power. But in his safety's stead, for sad ostent of his near death, he steeped his living name in drops of blood, heaven sweat for him, which earth drunk to his fame. And now, as this high combat grew to this too humble end, Sarpedon's death had this state more. 'Twas ushered by his friend and charioteer, brave Thrasymed, whom in his belly's So he, okay, yeah. Is it saying that Sarpedon had a charioteer named Thrasymedes? Or Thrasymed, as Chapman calls him. What's the name of Sarpedon's charioteer? I don't remember there being more than one Thrasymedes. Oh, Thrasymeles. But interestingly, Chapman calls him Thrasymed, which would make him have the same name as Nestor's son. Well, if that's what he calls him, then that's what we're going to call him. Which earth drunk to his fame. And now, as this high combat grew to this too humble end, Sarpedon's death had this state more. 'Twas ushered by his friend and charioteer, brave Thrasymed, whom in his belly's rim Patroclus wounded with his lance, and endless ended him. And then another act of name foreran his princely fate. His first lance missing, he let fly a second that gave date of violent death to Pedasus, who, as he joyed to die by his so honorable hand, did even in dying nay. His ruin startled the other steeds, the gears cracked, and the reins strappled his fellows, whose misrule Automedon restrains by cutting the entangling gears, and so dissundering quite the brave slain beast. When both the rest obeyed and went forthright. And then the royal combatants fought for the final stroke. See, I think they want this to be the British pronunciation, combatants, because of the way that the meter fits it. And then the royal combatants fought for the final stroke. Well, I could make it work. Rest obeyed and went forthright. Oh, wait. Brave slain beast, when both the rest obeyed and went forthright. And then the royal combatants fought for the final stroke, when Lycia's general missed again his high-raised javelin took above his shoulder empty way. But no such speedless flight Patroclus let his spear perform, that on the breast did light of his brave foe, where life's strings close about the solid heart, impressing a recureless wound. His knees then left their part and let him fall, when like an oak or poplar or a pine, now felled by artsmen on the hills, he stretched his form divine before his horse and chariot. Oh, okay. Left their part and let him fall, when like an oak or poplar or a pine, now felled by artsmen on the hills, he stretched his form divine before his horse and chariot. And as a lion leaps upon a goodly yellow bull, drives all the herd in heaps, and under his unconquered jaws the brave beast sighing dies. So sighed Sarpedon underneath his prince Pedon, underneath this Prince of Enemies, called Glaucus to him, his dear friend, and said, "Now, friend, thy hands much duty owe. Thy hands much duty owe to fight and arms. Now, to fight and arms. Now for my love it stands, thy heart in much hand." Now, for my love, it stands thy heart in much hand to approve that war is harmful. Now, to approve that war is harmful. Now, how active all thy forces are this 1 hour's act must show. First, call our Lycian captains up, round, and bring up all, and exhort to stand like friends about Sarpedon's fall. And spend thyself, thy steel for me. For be assured, no day of all thy life to thy last hour can clear thy black dismay in woe and infamy for me, if I be taken hence, spoiled of mine arms and thy renown. Spoiled of mine arms and thy renown, despoiled of my defense. Stand firm then, and confirm my men, and confirm thy men, and confirm thy men. This said, the bounds of death concluded all sight to his eyes, and to his nostrils breath. Patroclus, though his guard was strong, forced way through every doubt, climbed his high bosom with his foot, and plucked his javelin out. Patroclus, though his guard was strong, forced way through every doubt, climbed his high bosom with his foot, and plucked his javelin out. And with it, his javelin out. And with it drew the film and strings of his yet panting heart. And last, together with the pile, his princely panting heart. And last, together with the pile. And last, together with the pile, his princely soul did part. His horse, spoiled of both guide and king, thick snoring and amazed, and apt to flight, the Myrmidons made nimbly to, and seized. See, he probably wanted to say thick snorting, but he said thick snoring. I'm going to change that, because it's going to just sound like I made a mistake in the audiobook. It doesn't change the syllables. Did part. His horse, spoiled both of guide and king, thick snorting and amazed, and apt to flight, the Myrmidons made nimbly to, and seized. The Myrmidons made nimbly to, and seized. Glaucus, to hear his friend ask aid of him past all the rest, though well he knew his wound uncured, confusion filled his breast, not to have good in any power, and yet so much good will. And, laying his hand upon his wound, that pained him sharply still, and was by Teucer's hand set on from their assailed steep wall, in keeping hurt from other men, he did on Phoebus call, the god of medicines, for his cure. Right, let's do Glaucus. Oh, I didn't pull in Glaucus. Why dost thou? Said Glaucus, of what race I am, when like the race of leaves a race of men is. The god of medicines for his cure. Thou king of cures, said he, that art perhaps in Lycia with her rich progeny, or here in Troy, but anywhere, since thou hast power to hear, give a hurt and woeful man, as I am now, thine ear. This arm sustains a cruel wound, whose pains shoot every way. Every way. Afflict this shoulder and this hand, and nothing long can stay. And nothing long can stay a flux of blood still issuing. Nor therefore can I stand with any enemy in fight, nor hardly make my hand support my lance. And here lies dead the worthiest of men, Sarpedon, worthy son to Jove, whose power could yet abstain from all aid in this deadly need. Yet abstain from all aid in this deadly need. Give from all aid in this deadly need. Give thou then to aid me, O King of all aid to men hurt. O King of all aid to men hurt, assuage the extremity of this arm's anguish. Give it strength, that by my precedent I may excite my men to blows, and this dead course prevent of further violence. He prayed, and kind Apollo heard. Allayed his anguish, and his wound of all the black blood cleared that vexed it so, infused fresh powers into his weakened mind, and all his spirits flowed with joy that Phoebus stood inclined in such quick bounty to his prayers. Then, as Sarpedon willed, he cast about his greedy eye, and first of all instilled to all his captains all the stings that could inflame their fight for good Sarpedon. And from them he stretched good Sarpedon, and from them he stretched his speedy pace to Agenor, Hector, Venus' son, and wise Polydamas, and, only naming Hector, said, Hector, you now forget your poor auxiliary friends that in your toils have sweat their friendless souls out, far from home. Sarpedon, that sustained with justice and his virtues all, broad Lycia, hath not gained the like guard for his person here. For yonder dead he lies beneath the great Patroclus. Patroclus' lance. But come, let your supplies, good friends, stand near him. Oh, disdain to see his course defiled with Grecian fury, and his arms by their oppression spoiled, The Myrmidons are come. The Myrmidons are come enraged that such a mighty boot of Greeks Troy's darts have made at fleet. This said from head to foot. Grief struck their powers, past patience, and not to be restrained, to hear news of Sarpedon's death, who, though he appertained to other cities, yet to theirs he was the very fort, and led a mighty people there. the very fort, and led a mighty people there, of all whose better sort himself was best. This made them run in flames upon the foe. The first man Hector upon the foe. The first man Hector, to whose heart Sarpedon's death did go. Patroclus stirred the Grecian spirits, and first the Ajaces thus. You know, good father, the Ajaces thus. Now, brothers, be it dear to you to fight and succor us, as ever heretofore ye did with men, as ever heretofore ye did with men first excellent. The man lies slain that first did scale and raise the battlement that crowned our wall, the Lycian prince. But if we now shall add force to his course and spoil his arms, a prize may more be had of more and spoil his arms. But if we now shall add force to his course and spoil his arms, a prize may now be had of many great ones that for him will put on to the death. Will be had of many great ones that for him will put on to the death. Many great ones that for him will put on to the death. To this work these were prompt enough, and each side ordereth those phalanxes that most had rate of resolutions, the Trojans and the Lycian powers, the Greeks and Myrmidons. To this work these were prompt enough, and each side ordereth these phalanxes, and each side ordereth those phalanxes that most had rate of resolutions, the Trojans and the Lycian powers, the Greeks and Myrmidons. These ran together for the course, and closed with horrid cries, their armors thundering with the claps laid out about the prize. The claps laid on about the prize, and Jove about the impetuous broil pernicious night, poured out, as long as for his loved son pernicious labor fought. The first of Troy the Greeks foiled, when, not the last indeed, amongst the Myrmidons was slain, the great Agacleus seed. Agacleus? Agacleus. Let's check some names. Agacleus, Peleus, Budaeus. Troy, Peleus, Patroclus, Trojans. Okay. When, not the last indeed, amongst the Myrmidons was slain, the great Agacleus seed, divine Epigeus. I missed that one. Epigeus. Agacleus seed, divine Epigeus, that before had exercised command in fair Budaeus, but because he laid a bloody hand on his own sister's valiant son, to Peleus and his queen he came for pardon, and obtained his slaughter. His slaughter being the mean he came to Troy, and so to this. His slaughter being the mean he came to Troy, and so to this. He ventured even to touch the princely carcass, when a stone did more to him by much, sent out of able Hector's hand. It cut his skull in twain, and struck him dead. Patroclus, grieved to see his friend so slain, before the foremost thrust himself, and, as a falcon frays a flock of stairs or caddises, such fear brought his essays amongst the Trojans and their friends, and, angry at the heart as well as grieved for him so slain, another stony dart as good as Hector's he let fly, that dusted in the neck of Sthenelaus, thrust his head to earth first, and did break the nerves in sunder with his fall. Off fell the Trojans too, even Hector's self, and all as far as any man can throw. Off fell the Trojans too, even Hector's self, and all as far as any man can throw, provoked for games or in the wars to shed an enemy's soul, a light long dart. The first that turned was he that did control the targeteers of Lycia, Prince Glaucus, who to hell sent Bathocleus, Calchon. Long dart. The first that turned was he that did control the targeteers of Lycia, Prince Glaucus, who to hell sent Bathocleus, Calchon's son. He did in Hellas dwell, and shined for wealth and happiness amongst the Myrmidons. His bosom. Bathocleus, Calchon, Hellas. And shine for wealth and happiness amongst the Myrmidons. His bosom's midst the javelin struck. His bosom's midst the Myrmidons. His bosom's midst the javelin struck. His fall gat earth with groans. The Greeks grieved, and the Trojans joyed, for so renowned a man, about whom the Grecians stood firm. And then the death began on Troy's side by Meriones. He slew one great in war, Laogonus, Anetor's son, the priest of Jupiter, created in the idea. Laogonus. Anetor. Idaean. Hold on a second. Okay. Laogonus. Meriones. He slew one great in war, Laogonus, Anetor's son, the priest of Jupiter, created in the Idaean hill. Betwixt his jaw and ear the dart struck fast and loosed his soul, sad mists of hate and fear invading him. Anchises' son dispatched a brazen lance at bold Meriones, and hoped to make an equal chance on him with bold Laogonus, though under his broad shield he lay so close. But he discerned and made his body yield. Laogonus, though under his broad shield he lay so close. But he discerned and made his body yield so low that over him it flew, and trembling took the ground, with which Mars made it quench his thirst, and since the head. His thirst, And since the head could wound no better body, and yet thrown from ne'er the worse a hand, it turned from earth and looked awry. Aeneas let it stand, much angry at the vain event, and told Meriones he scaped but hardly, nor had cause to hope for such success another time. Though well he knew his dancing faculty, by which agility he scaped. Dancing faculty, by whose agility he scaped, for had his dart gone by with any least touch, instantly he had been ever slain. Instantly he had been ever slain. He answered. So this is Meriones, who we do have a voice for, because he talked earlier to Idomeneus. So I, at my tent in sable bark may say, I many. Dancing faculty, by whose agility he scaped, for had his dart gone by with any least touch, instantly he had been ever slain. He answered, Though my strength be good, it cannot render vain the strength of others with thy jests, nor art thou so divine, but when my lance shall touch at thee with equal speed to thine, death will share with it life's powers. Death will share with it thy life's powers. Thy confidence can shun no more than mine what his right claims. Menetius' noble son rebuked Meriones and said, You know, good father, Menetius' noble son, right claims. Menetius' noble son rebuked Meriones and said, What needs thou use this speech? Nor thy strength is approved with words, good friend, nor can we reach the body, nor make the enemy yield with our counter-braves. We must enforce the binding earth to hold them. In their graves. If you will war, fight. Will you speak? Give counsel. Counsel blows are at the ends of wars and words. Talk here the time in vain bestows. Counsel blows are at the ends of wars and words. Talk here the time in vain bestows. 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 Bestows. He said and led, and nothing less for anything he said, his speech being seasoned with such right the worthies seconded. And then, as in a sounding vale, near neighbor to a hill, wood-fellers make a far-heard noise with chopping still, and laying on blocks and trees. So they on men laid load, and beat like noises into air. Both as they struck and trode. But past their noise, so full of blood, of dust, of darts, lay smit divine Sarpedon, that a man must have an excellent wit that could but know him, and might fail, but know him, and might fail, so from his utmost head, even to the low plants of his feet, his form was altered, all thrusting near it every way, as thick as flies in spring, that in a sheepcote, when new milk assembles them, make wing, and buzz about the topful pails. nor ever was the eye of Jove averted from the fight. Topful pails. Nor ever was the eye of Jove averted from the fight. He viewed thought ceaselessly. He viewed thought ceaselessly from the fight. He viewed thought ceaselessly and diversely. He viewed thought ceaselessly and diversely upon the death, and diversely upon the death of great Achilles' friend. If Hector there to wreak his son should with his javelin, to wreak his son should with his javelin end his life and force away his arms, or still augment the field. He then concluded that the fight of much more soul should yield. He then concluded that the flight of much more soul should yield Achilles' good friend more renown, and that even to their gates he should drive Hector and his host, and so disanimates the mind of Hector and his host, and so disanimates the mind of Hector that he mounts his chariot and takes flight up with him, tempting all to her, affirming his insight, knew evidently that the beam of Jove's all-ordering skulls was then in sinking on their side, surcharged with flocks of souls. Then not the noble Lycians stayed, but for their slaughtered lord. Then not the noble Lycians stayed, but left their slaughtered lord amongst the corse's common heap. For many more were poured about and on him. While Jove's hand held out the bitter broil. And now they spoiled Sarpedon's arms, and to the ships the spoil was sent by Menicides. Then Jove thus charged the sun. Haste. Haste, honored Phoebus. Haste, honored Phoebus, let no more Greek violence be done to my Sarpedon, but his course of all the sable blood and javelins purged, then carry him far hence to some clear flood with whose waves wash, and then embalm each thorough cleansed limb with our ambrosia, which performed divine weeds put on him, and then to those swift mates and twins sweet sleep and death commit his princely person, that with speed they both may carry it to wealthy Lycia, where his friends and brothers will embrace and tomb it in some monument as fits a prince's place. Then flew Apollo to the fight from the Idalian hill, at all parts putting into act his great commander's will. Drew all the darts, washed, bombed the course, which, decked with ornament by sleep and death, those feathered twins he into Lycia sent. Patroclus then into Lycia sent. Patroclus then Automedon commands to give his steeds large reins, and all way to the chase, so madly he exceeds the strict commission of his friend, which, had kept a black death from him. But Jove's mind hath evermore outstepped the mind of man, who both affrights and takes the victory from any hardiest hand with ease. which he can justify. Victory from any hardiest hand with ease, which he can justify, though he himself commands him fight, as now he put this chance. Commands him in fight, as now he put this chase in Menicides' mind. How much then weighs the grace, Patroclus? Though which he can justify, though he himself commands him fight, as he now put this chase in Menicides' mind. How much then weighs the grace, Patroclus, that Jove gives thee now, in skulls put with thy death, in skulls put with thy death, gives thee now, in skulls put with thy death, of all these great and famous men, the honorable breath. Gives thee now. How much then weighs the grace, Patroclus, that Jove gives thee now, in skulls put with thy death, of all these great and famous men, the honorable breath? Okay, now we're really going to need the pronunciation guide here. Adrestus. This is when Patroclus goes on a huge rampage. Autonomous? I don't have autonomous, but let's say it's autonomous. Put him after automaton. Autonomous. Epistora, Paramus. Paramus. Pylartes. Elysis. Melanippus, Mollius. Okay. Honorable breath, of which, of all these great and famous men, the honorable breath, of which Adrestus first he slew, and next Autonomous, Epistora, and Paramus, Pylartes, Elysis. Epistora and Paramus, Pylartes, Epistora and Paramus, Pylartes, Elysis, swift Melanippus, Mollius. All these were overthrown by him, and all else put in rout. And then proud Ilion had stooped beneath his glorious hand. He raged so with his... And then proud Ilion had stooped beneath his glorious hand. He raged so with his lance. If Phoebus had not kept the tower, and helped the Ilians, sustaining ill thoughts 'gainst the prince. Thrice to the prominence of Troy's steep wall he bravely leaped. Thrice Phoebus thrust him thence, objecting his all-dazzling shield with his resistless hand. But fourthly, when like one of heaven he would have stirred his stand, Apollo threatened him and said... Okay, I think we now have separate Apollo angry and Apollo regular. Yep. Yeah. Okay, so now let's pull in Apollo angry. Turn head, ye well-rowed peers of Troy. Stirred his stand, Apollo threatened him, and said, Cease! Cease! It exceeds thy fate, forward Patroclus. Cease! It exceeds thy fate. It exceeds thy fate, forward Patroclus, to expugn with thy bold lance this state. Nor under great Achilles' powers, to thine superior far, lies Troy's grave ruin. To thine superior far, lies Troy's grave ruin. When he spoke, ruin. When he spake, Patroclus left that war, leapt far back, and his anger shunned. Hector detained his horse within the Scaean port, in doubt to put his personal force amongst the rout, and turn their heads, or shun in Troy the storm. Apollo, seeing his suspense, assumed the godly form of Hector's uncle, Asius, the Phrygian Dymas' son, who near the deep Sangarius had habitation. Dymas, Asius. Assumed the goodly form of Hector's uncle, Asius, the Phrygian Dymas' son, who near the deep Sangarius had habitation. Hector's uncle, Asius, the Phrygian Dymas' son, who near the deep Sangarius had habitation, being brother to the Trojan queen. His shape, Trojan queen. His shape Apollo took, and asked of Hector why his spirit so clear the fight forsook, affirming 'twas unfit for him, and wished his forces were as much above his as they moved in an inferior sphere. He should with shame to him be gone, and so bade drive away against Patroclus, to approve if he that gave them day would give the glory of his death to his preferred lance. So left he him, and to the fight did his bright head advance. And to the fight did his bright head advance, mixed with the multitude, and stirred foul tumult for the foe. Then Hector bade Cebriones put on, himself let go all other Greeks within his reach, and only gave command to front Patroclus. He at him jumped down, his strong left hand a javelin held, his right a stone, a marble sharp and such as his large hand had power to grip, and gave it strength so much as he could lie to, nor stood long in fear of that huge man that made against him, but full on with his huge stone he ran, discharged, and drave it twixt the brows. Okay. Right, this is when Patroclus kills Cebriones. I thought Hector picked up the stone, because a lot of times Chapman will not say who is doing it. He'll just call him he. Gave command to front Patroclus. He at him jumped down. Patroclus. He at him jumped down, his strong left hand a javelin held, his right a stone, a marble sharp, and such as his large hand had power to grip, and gave it strength so much as he could lie to, nor stood long in fear of that huge man that made against him, but full on with his huge stone he ran, discharged, and drave it twixt the brows of bold Cebriones, nor could the thick bone there be prepared, nor could the thick bone there prepared extenuate so the excess, but out so the excess, but out it the excess, but out it drave, extenuate so the excess, but out it drave his broken eyes, which in the dust fell down, and he dived after, which conceit of diving took the son of old Menetius, which conceit of diving took the son of old Menetius, who thus played upon the other's bane. Which conceit of diving took the son of old Menetius, who thus played. Which conceit of diving took the son of old Menetius, who thus played upon the other's bane. You know, good father, our great friend, upon the other's bane. O heavens! For truth, this Trojan was a... O heaven! O heavens! O heavens! O heavens! O heavens! O heavens! For truth, this Trojan was a passing active man. With what exceeding ease he dives, as if it... With what exceeding ease he dives, as if at work he were within the fishy seas. This man alone would furnish cheer for 20 men, though 'twere a storm, to leap out of a sail and gather oysters for them all. He does it here so well, and he does it here so well, and there are many. He does it here for them all. He does it here as well, and there are many such in Troy. Of a sail and gather oysters for them all. He does it here as well. He does it here as well, and there are many such in Troy, and there are many such in Troy. Thus jested he so near. Thus jested he so near his own grave death, and then grave death, and then made in to spoil the charioteer with such a lion's force and fate as often ruining stalls of fat oxen gets at length a mortal wound to sting his soul out of that ravenous breast that was so insolent, and so insolent, and so his life's bliss proves his bane, so deadly confident with, and so his life's bliss proves his vain. Out of that ravenous breast that was so often ruining the stalls of fat oxen, gets at length a mortal wound to sting his soul out of that ravenous, his soul out of that ravenous breast that was so insolent, and so so insolent, and so life's bliss proves his and so life's bliss proves his bane. So deadly confident wert thou, Patroclus, in pursuit. So deadly confident wert thou, Patroclus, in pursuit of good Cebriones, to whose defense now, Cebriones, to whose defense now Hector leaped. To whose defense now Hector leaped. To whose defense now Hector leapt. The opposite address leapt. The opposite address these masters of the cry in war. The opposite address these masters of the cry in war now made was of the kind of two fierce kings of beasts, opposed in strife about a hind, slain on the forehead of a hill, both sharp and hungry set. Of a hill, both sharp and hungry set, and to the curry never came. I think I wrote that one down. I think it's Curie. Currie. Did not write that down before. Where was it? Let's see. Curry. No. A less common variant of curry. And curry, is there like an antiquated? I want to say sometimes you could say like somebody curried forth. I'm going to say curry. One, two. Two fierce kings of beasts, opposed in strife about a hind, slain on the forehead of a hill, both sharp and hungry set, and to the curry never came, but like two deaths they met. Nor these two deaths they met. Nor these two entertained less mind of mutual prejudice about the body, close to which when each had pressed for prize, Hector the head laid hand upon, which once gripped, never could be forced from him. Patroclus then upon the feet got hold. Never could be forced from him. Patroclus then upon the feet got hold, and he pinched with as sure a nail. So both stood tugging there, while all the rest made eager fight and grappled everywhere. And as the east and south winds strive to make a lofty wood bow to their greatness, barky elms, wild ashes, beeches bowed even with the earth. Beeches bowed even with the earth, in whose thick arms the mighty vapors lie, and toss by turns all, either way, in whose thick arms the mighty vapors lie, and toss by turns all, either way, their leaves at random fly. Boughs murmur, and their bodies crack, and with perpetual din the sylvans falter, and the storms are never to begin. So raged the fight, and all from flight plucked her forgotten wings, while some still stuck, still new winged shafts flew dancing from their strings, huge stones sent after that did shake the shields about the course, who now in dust's soft forehead stretched forgat his guiding horse. As long as Phoebus turned his wheels about the midst of heaven, so long the touch of either's darts the falls of both made even. But when his wain drew near the west, the Greeks past measure were the abler soldiers, and so swept the Trojan tumult clear. swept the Trojan tumult clear from off the body, out of which they drew the hurled-in darts, and from his shoulders stripped his arms, and then to more such parts Patroclus turned his and from his shoulders stripped his arms. And then, to more such parts, Patroclus turned his striving thoughts to do the Trojans ill. Thrice, like the god of war, he charged, his voice as horrible, and thrice nine those three charges slew. But in the fourth essay, oh then, Patroclus, showed thy last. The dreadful sun made way against that onset. Fourth essay, oh then, Patroclus. The fourth essay, oh then, Patroclus, showed thy last. The dreadful sun made way against that onset. Yet the prince discerned no deity. He kept the press so, and besides obscured his glorious eye with such felt darkness. At his back he made a sudden stand, and twixt his neck and shoulders laid downright with either hand a blow so weighty that his eyes a giddy darkness took, and from his head his three-plumed helm the bounding violence shook, that rung beneath his horse's hoofs, and like a waterspout was crushed together with the fall. The plumes that set it out all spattered with black blood and dust. Whenever heretofore it was a capital offense to have dust or gore defile a triple-feathered helm, but on the head divine and youthful temples of their prince it used. A triple-feathered helm, but on the head divine and youth. All spattered with black blood and dust, whenever heretofore it was a capital offense to have dust or gore defile a triple-feathered helm. Dust or gore defile a triple-feathered helm. But on the head divine and youthful temples of their prince it used untouched. To shine. Yet now Jove gave it Hector's hands, the other's death was near, besides whose lost and filed helm his huge, long, weighty spear, well bound with iron, in his hand. Hector's hands, the other's death was near. Besides whose lost and filed helm his huge, long, weighty spear, well bound with iron, in his hand was shivered, and his shield fell from his shoulders to his feet, the baldric strewing the field. His curates left him like the rest, and all this only done by great Apollo. Then his mind took in confusion the vigorous knittings of his joints dissolved. And thus dismayed, a Dardan, one of a Dardan, one of Panthus' sons, and one that overlaid all Trojans of his place with darts, swift footing, skill and force in noble horsemanship, and one that tumbled from their horse, one after other, 20 men. And when he did but learn the art of war, nay, when he first did in the field discern a horse and chariot of his guide, this man, with all these parts, his name Euphorbus, comes behind, and twixt the shoulder darts forlorn Patroclus, who yet lived, and the other, getting force, comes behind, and twixt the shoulder darts forlorn Patroclus, who yet lived, and the other, getting forth his javelin, took him to his strength, nor durst he stand the worth of thee, Patroclus, though disarmed, who yet discomfited by Phoebus and Euphorbus' wound, the red heap of the dead he too late shunned and retired. When Hector saw him yield, and knew he yielded with a wound, he scoured the armed field, came close up to him, and both sides struck quite through with his lance. He saw him yield, and knew he yielded with a wound. He scoured the armed field, came close up to him, and both sides struck quite through with his lance. He fell, and his most weighty fall gave fit tune to his chance, for which struck quite through with his lance. He fell, and his most weighty fall gave fit tune to his chance, for which all Greece extremely mourned. And as a mighty strife about a little fount begins, and rises to the life of some fell boar resolved to drink, when likewise to the spring a lion comes alike disposed, the boar thirsts, and his king both proud. The boar thirsts, and his king both proud, and both will first be served. And then the lion takes advantage of his sovereign strength, and the other fainting makes resign his thirst up with his blood. Patroclus, so enforced, when he had forced so much brave life, was from his own divorced. And thus his great divorcer braved. Patroclus, thy conceit gave the aversion of our Troy, and to thy fleet of freight of Trojan ladies, their free lives put all in bands by thee. Patroclus, thy conceit gave the aversion of our Troy, and to thy fleet of freight of Trojan ladies, to their free lives put all in bands by thee. Trojan ladies, their free lives put all in bands by thee. But too much prizer of thyself, all these are. But too much prizer of thyself, all these are propped by me. For these have my horse stretched their hooves. My horse stretched their hooves to this so long a war. My horse stretched their hooves to this so long a war, and I far best of Troy in arms, keep off from Troy as far, even to the last beam of my life, their necessary day. And here, in place of us and ours, on thee shall vultures prey. Poor wretch, not shall thy mighty friend afford thee any aid, that gave thy parting much deep charge. And this perhaps he said, Marshal Patroclus, turn not face, nor see my fleet before the curates from great Hector's breast, all gilded with his gore, thou hewest in pieces. If thus vain were his far-stretched commands, as vain was thy heart to believe his words lay in thy hands. As vain was thy heart to believe his words lay in thy hands. He, languishing, replied, This proves thy glory. This proves thy glory worse than vain, that when the two gods have given thy hands what powers did obtain, they conquering and they spoiling me both of my arms and mind, it being a work of ease for them, thy soul should be so blind to oversee their evident... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hit the mic there. 1, 2, 3. One, two, three. It being a work of ease for them, thy soul should be so blind to oversee their evident deeds, and take their powers to thee. When, if the powers of 20 such had dared to encounter me, my lance had strewed earth with them all. Thou dost only obtain them all. Thou only dost obtain a third place in my death, whom first a harmful fate hath slain. Effected by Latona's son. A second by Latona's son. Second and first of men, Euphorbus. And this one thing more concerns thee. Note it then. Thou dost only earth with them all. Thou only dost obtain a third place in my death, whom first a harmful fate hath slain, effected by Latona's son. Second and first of men, Euphorbus. And this one thing more concerns thee. Note it then. Thou shalt not long survive thyself. Thou shalt not long survive thyself. Nay, now death calls for thee, and violent fate. Now death calls for thee, and violent fate. Achilles' lance shall make this good for me. Thus death joined to his words his end. His soul took instant wing, and to the house that hath no lights descended, sorrowing for his sad fate, to leave him young, and in his ablest age. He dead, yet Hector asked him why. In that prophetic rage he so forspake him. He dead, yet Hector asked him why, in that prophetic rage, he so forspake him. When none knew but great Achilles might prevent his death. And on his lance receive his and on his lance receive his latest light. Thus, his latest light. Thus setting foot, and on his lance receive his latest light. Thus setting on his side his foot, he drew out of his wound his brazen lance, and upwards cast the body on the ground, when quickly, while the dart was hot, he charged Automaton, divine guide of Achilles' steeds, in great contention to seize him too. But his so swift and deathless horse that fetched their gifts to Peleus from the gods. Soon wrapped him from his reach. To seize him too, but his so swift and deathless horse that fetched their gift to Peleus from the gods, soon wrapped him from his reach.